What if the very tools your company uses to manage risk are actually hiding its biggest threats? It's a pretty terrifying thought, and it's right at the heart of what we're going to call the risk illusion. So let's dive in.
We've all seen this, right? The corporate risk register. It's supposed to be our security blanket. This nice, neat list of all the bad things that could possibly happen, all ranked by how likely and how bad they'd be. It's designed to make us feel like, okay, we're organized, we're prepared, we're in control.
But what if that feeling of control is just that, a feeling, an illusion? What if this very document, the one that's designed to give us clarity, is actually creating some really dangerous blind spots? That's the big question we're digging into, and it's based on some fantastic work by security expert Tony Ridley.
So this all starts with what's called the illusion of control. It comes from our very human need to make messy things neat and tidy. But as we're about to see, risk is, well, it's anything but neat. And this really gets to the core of the problem. You see, real-world risk isn't some simple checklist you can just tick off. No, it's this tangled web of interconnected problems that build on each other, sometimes over months or even years. And a static tool like a risk register, it just can't keep up with that.
Okay, so risk is already a complex beast, but guess what? Our own company structures can make the problem a whole lot worse. And this brings us to the danger of silos.
Just think about it for a second. The finance department sees risk through a money lens. IT is looking at cyber threats. Operations is worried about the supply chain. Every department is documenting and managing its own little slice of the risk pie. And the result? Nobody is looking at the whole pie. You get this completely fragmented picture of threats that are actually working together against the entire company.
Tony Ridley has this perfect kind of formal way of putting it. He calls it illogical legacy segmentation and siloed constructs. It's basically a fancy way of saying we've built these walls inside our own companies that stop us from seeing the huge unified threats that are right outside. Here's a really great way to picture it. Imagine you've got guards on the north wall of a castle, the south wall, and the east wall. They're all doing their jobs, doing them great. But because they never talk to each other, they completely miss the enemy that's been quietly tunneling underneath the entire castle. That's exactly what siloed risk management does.
Now, there's another huge piece of this puzzle that traditional risk management just often forgets. It's a blind spot so big, it actually needs a whole new philosophy to fix it. Let's talk about the human threat.
So most companies use what's called enterprise risk management, or ERM. You've probably heard of it. It's the standard playbook for looking at things that could hurt the bottom line. You know, market shifts, operational failures, that kind of stuff.
But there's another, much more complete approach. Enterprise Security Risk Management, or ESRM. And it's designed to bring back a critical component that traditional ERM just tends to leave out.
In this slide really lays out the difference perfectly. So while ERM handles general threats, ESRM specifically pulls in the security expertise you need to manage threats from deliberate, malicious human beings. You know, people who are actively trying to steal from, disrupt, or harm the organization.
Basically, you could say that traditional ERM was fighting with one arm tied behind its back. It created a framework that was often blind to things like crime, sabotage, and corporate espionage, all because it didn't have that specific security focus to even see them coming. So if a simple list isn't cutting it, and we have to account for human threats, what are we supposed to do? Well, the answer is we need to shift our perspective completely. It's time to start seeing the whole landscape.
This quote just nails the entire problem. Your risk register? It isn't the whole story. It's just a top-of-mind snapshot. It barely scratches the surface of the incredibly complex system of risks that your company is actually facing day to day.
The call to action here is really clear. We've got to zoom out. We need to stop staring at individual items on a list and start mapping the entire interconnected environment of risk that our business is swimming in.
So what does this landscape actually look like? Well, unlike a neat little list, the risks are messy. They overlap, they're interconnected. Some threats hit you really fast, others build up slowly over time. But the most important thing is they work together as a system, and they have to be seen as one. And that brings us to our final, and honestly, our most important section. Because when we try to force that complex, messy landscape into a simple list, we don't just miss stuff, we actively create new dangers. Let's talk about what your risk list is hiding.
This is the great paradox of risk management. The very thing we do to make a risk register clean and manageable is often what creates our biggest vulnerabilities. It is a classic case of good intentions paving the road to, well, disaster.
And here is exactly how it happens. Let's say the HR team, the operations team, and the finance team all report something vague like people risk. To an administrator who's just trying to clean up the master list, those all look like duplicates. So, for the sake of clarity, they get merged or deleted. But in that one simple move, all the vital context, all the nuance from each of those departments is just gone. You've just manufactured a brand new blind spot in your company, all in the name of being tidy.
And that's the scary part. Hitting delete on a line in a spreadsheet doesn't delete the threat from the real world. It's still out there. Only now, nobody's watching it. So I really want you to let this sink in. It is almost certain that your organization right now is only managing a small fraction of the risks it actually faces. And the gap between what's on your list and what's in that real risk landscape, well, that gap is where the real danger is.
Which leaves us with one last critical question to think about for your own company. Is the threat that's ultimately going to cause harm the one you've been tracking for years, or is it the one that got deleted from the list just to make it look clean? It's something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.